On this episode of OFallon Matters, join police officers for a cup of joe, get to know a hero from our past, and get an update on the I-70 Traffic Flow Improvements Project. All this and more next on OFallon Matters. Welcome to this episode of OFallon Matters. When emergency strikes, residents need to know swiftly. Now find out how you can protect yourself and your family by being informed.
With the threat of severe spring and summer weather impending, the City of OFallon recently launched an improved emergency notification system called Swift 911.
The system is really nice because it allows us the flexibility to get a hold of residents, either the entire city at once or even down to one or two households, and notify them of emergency situations that they have to be aware of at a very quick timeline. So it takes a matter of minutes and we can get a message out to as many people as we need to about something going on in an emergency situation.
This new system informs you of an emergency and other important notifications such as boil advisories, road closures, and more.
It gives us a chance to get that message out as quickly as possible, and it lets the residents really choose how they want to get that message. Everybody will get a phone call, or they can get text, they can get email. It's up to the resident really to choose how they want to receive the information.
You may be wondering how you can sign up for the Swift 911 system.
We take all of our utility database and we send that to the company. They merge it with lists that they have, and through that we get, we'll say 95% of residents will be already automatically uploaded into the system. There are some that, for whatever reason, we don't have their information or the company didn't. So what we encourage every resident to do is to go in and log into the system. Just go to our website at ofallon.mo.us, log into the system, check your information, put your information in. That's going to also make sure that the information we have is most up to date, and it's going to allow you as the resident the ability to choose how you want to receive that message.
And if you have to sign up, it should only take 5 minutes or so. Also, if you can't figure out how to sign up or simply have questions about the Swift 911 system, you can always contact OFallon's Citizens First Department and they'll gladly help you out.
The great thing about this system is it gives us a lot of flexibility to do what we need to do. But honestly, I hope no one ever gets a call from it, because we only want to use this in an emergency situation or something that's really important that everybody needs to know. I want our residents to know that if you don't receive a call, that's a good thing. And check your information, make sure you're in there, and then hope you never hear from us, because that means everything's going well.
It's not always easy to chat with a police officer while they're on the job, but residents got a chance to talk to some of OFallon's finest during the Coffee with a Cop event.
I'm already working. All right, or you can do that.
A short while ago, residents looking for a pick-me-up did so in the company of OFallon's finest. During our first Coffee with a Cop event of the year, commuters got more than just the jolt of caffeine they expected at the Main Street McDonald's. They also enjoyed real conversations with our officers about issues that really matter. Coffee with a Cop is an initiative that seeks to bridge the gap between our police force and the community they serve. And what better way to bring people together than over a cup of joe?
We are in a service-driven organization. It's important for us as police officers to get out of the cars and into the neighborhoods, our businesses, letting people know that we're around and letting the businesses know that we care. So that's an important, very simple thing that we do that I believe makes a difference.
Our first Coffee with a Cop was held at a local Starbucks in 2015, and it was a massive success. Since that time, our police department has undergone a number of changes. They have a new look for their uniforms and cars, and a new home at the OFallon Justice Center. But one thing hasn't changed. Each Coffee with a Cop event is filled with officers who genuinely enjoy meeting and chatting with residents.
My favorite part is just talking to people. There's a lot of people that have never had an opportunity to talk to a police officer in a casual setting or ask a question they've always wondered about. So a lot of people will reach out to us on social media and ask questions, but it's a lot different when you can actually sit across from a police officer, talk to them, maybe get to know a little bit about them, and hopefully learn a little bit about the job.
you can just sit back, relax, have a nice conversation with them, learn what they do and what their job's about, and learn that they're out here to help protect us and help us through the daily lives that we go through, keeping us safe and protecting us.
Coffee with a Cop is a great way to build relationships, one cup at a time. Besides chatting with our officers, families got to meet our canine dogs, explore the equipment our officers use on a daily basis, and hopefully build a relationship with the men and women of our police department. Coffee with a Cop is an ongoing program, and you can expect to see our officers at more local restaurants throughout the year. If you want to be notified about future Coffee with a Cop events, consider following our police department on social media.
If they want to come to a Coffee with a Cop event, follow us on Facebook. It's the OFallon, Missouri Police Department, and we always post it well in advance as an event, so you can like it, follow it, decide you want to come to it, and you'll get reminded when it's going to be occurring.
Thanks to OFallon's police officers for serving and protecting our community. You are appreciated. Next on OFallon Matters is a story of tribute, heroism, and sacrifice. Joe Meyer has more.
Over the past century, the city of OFallon has thrived. In fact, OFallon is the second largest city in the St. Louis metropolitan area. And there are hundreds of stories of heroic actions that have helped shape our city into what it is today. On this segment of OFallon Matters, we'll take you back to a time when OFallon was divided by the Civil War. Now, here's the story of a former slave named Archer Alexander and his heroics on a dark night back in 1863.
He was born in Virginia in December of 1816. He was a slave. He had been brought to Missouri early on, probably about 1829 is what we think, and he had been sold. He kept being sold because he was considered uppity. He apparently was very intelligent and really desired freedom. When he was sold, he was separated from the parents, the only parents that he knew.
Archer was eventually sold and became the property of David Pittman around 1855. Now, Archer married a slave named Louisa in the 1830s, but the couple lived separately on the farms of their owners. Now, here's where the story gets interesting.
In February of 1863 is when he really became an American hero, because the slave knew what his owner, a Confederate sympathizer, had taken part in. And there had been some citizens that had sawed through the timbers of a wooden trestle of a railroad bridge nearby, knowing that when the train came across that trestle, the bridge would collapse. At night, in darkness, Archer managed to run 5 miles away and warn some Germans, some Unions, soldiers, of what had taken place. And because of that, they were able to repair the trestle in time for the bridge to not collapse.
Later on, Archer informed troops that rebel sympathizers were concealing arms on the Campbell farm next to the Pittmans. Fearing for his safety, Archer escaped to St. Louis and was given refuge by William Elliott, a prominent Unionist and founder of Washington University.
He became aware of what Archer had done, but see, because of the fact that what they had done was a disloyal act and something that was against the Union government and could have endangered and killed people, what Archer had done, William Elliott knew was a good thing, and he required and he went after an order of protection. So Archer Alexander is living at the Elliott residence, and slave catchers had come to try to take him back. They beat him and they grabbed him and they threw him on the wagon and they took him to the St. Louis jail.
Once William Elliott found out what the slave catchers did to Archer, he rushed to the city jail to free him. In fact, the two slave catchers fled in disgrace because of their illegal deed. Eventually, Richard Pittman tried to establish his right to Archer Alexander through the civil courts, which prompted William Elliott to move Alexander to the safety of Alton, Illinois, where he worked as a farmhand. During this time, Archer witnessed the death of his son in the Union Army, and Louisa was still bound to slavery.
William Elliott knows that things are about to change for her, but Archer doesn't feel that she's safe and wants her free. So he has managed to arrange with a local person here, a German, to help her escape with a daughter. And then soon thereafter, 2 more daughters are able to escape and join her.
In 1876, Alexander's features were used by sculptor Thomas Ball in the Emancipation Memorial statue, preserving his place in history. The statue of Abraham Lincoln has stood in Washington, D.C.'s Lincoln Park ever since.
William Elliott sent a picture of Archer Alexander and his story to him. I do know that the first draft of that monument was to be a slave, and he was to be wearing a patriot cap and sort of like just praying relief. But it was after seeing Archer Alexander's portrait that the monument was changed, and it's a monument of the slave holding chains that have just been broken.
Recently, St. Charles County and the city of O'Fallon petitioned the U.S. Department of the Interior to rename Tributary B to Archer Alexander Creek.
Resolution 222-2018C, a resolution calling upon the United States Department of the Interior to officially change the domestic geographic name of the creek in St. Charles County, Missouri, currently designated as Tributary B, to Archer Alexander Creek.
Thank you. Motion for approval.
Herwick.
Motion by Councilman Herrick, second. Second by Councilman Hinman. Questions or comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes.
Now, Tributary B runs through the city of O'Fallon, Cottleville, and Dardine Prairie. The tributary runs through the land that Archer was bound to as a slave. What a fitting tribute to a man who saved the lives of Union soldiers by putting his own life on the line. And if you would like to read more about Archer's journey to freedom, you can pick up several books from your local library. Also, keep your eye out the next time you drive by Tributary B, because it just may have a new name.
From the healed home to Zumwalt's Fort, O'Fallon is a community filled with history, but there is one historical landmark you might pass every day. OFallon TV's Brett Figgis is here with a story of the School Street Water Tower.
Today on O'Fallon Matters, we're going to take you back in time to a very different O'Fallon. And we're going to share the history of one of our community's oldest landmarks, the School Street Water Tower. But this tower wasn't always there, and it's probably a bit newer than you'd expect. Nowadays, water is something we just take for granted, and the infrastructure that makes it possible, from the water mains throughout our community to the state-of-the-art water treatment plant that powers the system, is largely out of sight and out of mind. But it wasn't too long ago that O'Fallon didn't have a water system, and in the early 1900s, where your water came from was a whole different story.
What I've always been told is that they relied on cisterns, which might have been a tank in the ground that they collected water from the roofs, which flowed into the cistern, which they would then get the water as they needed it. So you can probably guess by that it wasn't always the best water, depending what might have been in the cistern along with the water.
This particular map goes back to 1905. The main source of water back in the early 1920s was the mill pond. Of course, that mill pond had to supply water for the residents here and also for the railroad and also for fire protection. We've got a map, or not a map, but a picture of what the old firehouse was. That was actually, they had to lay lines to the mill pond to put water out. And it was a hand pump or a steam pump.
Building cisterns and relying on the mill pond for water worked when the population of O'Fallon was a few hundred people. It's hard to imagine now, but back in those days, O'Fallon was little more than a railway stop and a few shops and stores. But as O'Fallon grew, so too did the burgeoning town's water needs, and it became apparent that the city would need a more permanent solution. OFallon was racked by 2 serious droughts in the 1920s and 30s. And as a rural community, if the land couldn't provide enough water, you were pretty much out of luck. With just 600 residents at the time, OFallon couldn't afford a water tower on its own, but help came from an unexpected place. In 1935, the United States Congress approved the Works Progress Administration as part of President Franklin D. Roosevelt's New Deal, and the WPA approached OFallon about building a well and tower in anticipation of future growth. If OFallon agreed to foot some of the cost, the WPA would handle the rest. But it still represented an enormous cost to our tiny community, and it took 4 years and 2 mayors to get it passed.
$150,000 in 1939 was a lot of money. And then the city's portion was going to be $40,000. But they still had to issue the bonds and get things going, get the engineering done.
OFallon was just coming out of the Depression, money was scarce, and that was a lot of money back in the day. And so people were a little skeptical of going into debt for the city to build water. But Mayor Westhoff at the time, which is Paul Westhoff, he was the mayor that broke the tie to get the water system actually started. And so even though it was controversial at the time, people in OFallon knew that they had to have a reliable source of water, and to do that they needed a well and a tower.
A city well had to be dug first. A lot of people don't realize that. That well was actually drilled right on West Elm Street. Years ago when I worked for the city, that's where I used to report. That was well number 1. It was drilled about 900 foot deep, but it only gave maybe 200 gallons a minute. But that was enough water for the time back in the 30s and 40s. Then needed that tower, and the tower we're talking about, which is on School Street, 75,000 gallons. And now you had better pressure, you could put water out. And a lot of people, I was reading some of these articles I hadn't seen for a while, their insurance rate dropped dramatically when the new water system came online.
With the tower in place, OFallon was poised to grow into the city it's become today. To give you an idea of how critical a reliable water system was in those days, take a look at this 1958 advertisement for OFallon that points to OFallon's modern sewers and water system above everything else, and notably 5 bullet points above low taxes. It also became a local landmark, visible in photos from the era, and it became something of an attraction for OFallon's youth.
I'm sure there's many people probably climbed it. I had to climb it, but I climbed it because I had to. Part of my job, I basically climbed most all the towers in town, but I'm sure that you could probably hear stories about people climbing it, but it wasn't a very safe thing to do at the time. But
I will say, I did try to climb the one on School Street, the tower we're talking about, and I think I made it about 15 feet up in the air before I decided I was better off on the ground. So I didn't make it very far up, but yes, that was always kind of a rite of passage of childhood sometimes, is to try to climb the water tower.
The School Street Water Tower served our community faithfully for decades, and even as new towers started to dot the OFallon skyline, our first tower remained in service. Finally, some 10 or 15 years back, this tower was emptied for the final time. It had several issues. Its capacity and location were no longer sufficient for the OFallon community, and it was basically superseded by more efficient towers elsewhere in town. Now, its story will be coming to an end, and this icon of OFallon will disappear from our skyline. But its memory will always be immortalized in old family photos and stories.
It was one of those things you took for granted, but if you looked up, you always saw that water tower, and it was an older style tower. It's not like the newer towers we have now, so it always stood out for its own, and it had a sense of character. And people always knew that was the first water tower for the city.
The I-70 Traffic Flow Improvements Project is right on schedule. We caught up with Assistant City Engineer Jeff Schupfer for an update on this massive road project.
The City of OFallon has good news for residents who experience congested intersections and delays on I-70 through OFallon. The I-70 Traffic Flow Improvements Project is well on its way to improving traffic for residents.
The I-70 Outer Roads project will be building new outer roads in OFallon, from the T.R. Hughes interchange up to the Highway K and Woodlawn overpass. We're going to be converting the north outer road, which is commonly known as East Terra, to a one-way outer road, westbound only. And on the south side, we will be building a brand new outer road that doesn't exist today. And we will then convert the current interchanges over to where you can slip on and off the highway instead of exiting at the traditional interchange with the diamond type configuration.
This superior infrastructure project is broken into 2 phases. Phase 1 of the project will focus on the area from T.R. Hughes to Main Street and Highway K, which is the largest portion of the project. Now Phase 2 will focus on the area west of K all the way to Woodlawn. Each phase is fully funded with a combination of County Road Board, MoDOT, and federal dollars from East-West Gateway. The city is funding approximately $1.2 million for the project. OFallon's funds will be used exclusively to address improvements along Highway K. And residents will start to see progress along the I-70 corridor as OFallon engineers prepare for the next steps in the process.
So the City of OFallon has been reviewing and designing improvements to the I-70 Outer Road project now for about the last almost 3 years. We're finally at a point where we're ready to move forward with construction. So the Phase 1 project, our completion date is December of 2019. And believe it or not, we're also hoping to include the Phase 2 construction to be done around that same time.
Earlier this year, residents were invited to an open house to get an up-close glance at the final plans for the project. At the meeting, OFallon staff answered important questions about the project. If you would like to find out more about the I-70 improvements projects, don't worry, because there are still opportunities.
We also are looking to have a booth at the Public Works Fair in May. And we also keep everything more up to date on our website at ofallon.mo.us/I-70.
Stay up to date on the I-70 traffic flow improvements project by watching future episodes of OFallon Matters. Progress is right around the corner, and this is just one of the many projects that are helping to renew OFallon.
When residents call the OFallon Police Department for emergency or non-emergency situations, this dedicated professional division handles the calls. Here's an inside look at the OFallon PD's Communications Division.
Behind every law enforcement action on the road is a dispatcher in front of a screen. Known in the profession as the lifeblood of any police department, dispatch must coordinate resources, run checks, and process information at lightning-fast speeds. OFallon's Police Department Communications Section operates 24/7, 365 days a year.
They're the brains of our operation. They're the first line of contact with our citizens. Their goal is to get the information and get the officers there as quickly and safely as possible to handle what their need is.
We have 15 full-time dispatchers and 1 part-time dispatcher. The squads are set up where we have 4, 4, 4, and 3. My goal eventually is to have 16 full-time dispatchers. That way we have 4 on every shift.
Dispatchers never know what their day may bring. They could get a call that a mass casualty incident is taking place or a small child is choking and unconscious. This high-paced job could mean the difference between life and death. And it's important that channels of communication are wide open and everything clicks. Descriptions and details must be spot on to avert a potential disaster.
It's a professional job that takes a lot of dedication and a lot of concentration. They have to multitask and still do it professionally.
The dispatchers are the first point of contact for both the police department officers and the citizens as a whole. Where our initial thought process when somebody calls the dispatch center is to find out where the incident is occurring, to make sure that it's even in our city. Otherwise, we can refer them to another department or to get other resources. We ask who, what, where, when, why, and weapons, especially for officer safety purposes. we don't get a second chance. If there's a high stress situation, we don't get a do-over. So we want to make sure that we get all the information correct the first time around.
The communications wing of OFallon's Justice Center features state-of-the-art dispatching technology along with other comfortable amenities that make this a great space for employees.
This space is unbelievable. We have separate offices for supervisor, a file room. Dispatch has their own break room that they can step away from their consoles and go to our own restroom as well. Our consoles are state-of-the-art. They work independently from each one of the workstations.
We have the latest in 911 technologies all the way down to ergonomic consoles, a high stress level job that predominantly was always done sitting. We now have the ability to stand. We even have a treadmill in our center.
It's bright. They've got a big window. We want this to be a fun place. We want this to be the place that every dispatcher in a region wants to work. And we try to do that with the space they're working in.
Police dispatchers must be able to multitask and deal effectively with different personality types. They must remain in control of their emotions so they can help victims remain calm. But it's truly a position where employees can grow and feel good about making a difference.
People don't call 911 on their good days. So to have the empathy and to be able to help, that's what it takes. It takes a strong person.
I don't know that there's ever really an average day in the dispatch center, and that's one reason why people like dispatching. It's never the same thing twice.
911 communications can be a very high stress level job, but the positives always outweigh the negative.
The next time an emergency happens, residents can rest easy knowing that OFallon's Police Department has professional, experienced dispatchers ready to serve the community.
Thanks for joining us today. If you have a good story idea, let us know. You can email us at OFallonTV@OFallon.mo.us. And please remember, give back to your community because OFallon matters to all of us.